Welcome back, everybody. We're getting ready to start segment 2 of chapter 4. We talked a few minutes about economic models and what the economists, I guess, were somewhat surprised in some of the economic models is kind of how they work in some markets. So the authors talk about, as I said earlier, 3 different markets. They talk about a computer market. They talk about the market for crude oil and gasoline. And then lastly, they talk about the stock market. We'll pick up the stock market a little later, but we're going to talk about the computer market and crude oil market. So if you just think about the computer market, and maybe some of you haven't been around long enough or not old enough to really understand the evolution, but the computer market's gone from these huge mainframes, gigantic behemoths. When I was in graduate school at Ohio State, even though we had some personal computers, we did most of our work on the mainframe over in the computer center. And that computer center, it was on the top floor, and I don't know how many terminals were in there. There may have been 100 terminals in there. And it didn't matter what time of day or night you went over there because it was open 7/24. The place was packed. And you're sitting there clicking and typing away, and you're printing, and it's on that green bar paper, and it was just looking back on just a mess. But things have improved so quickly in the computer market, and it goes back to technology and improvements in the software and improvements in the efficiency, and so much of the improvements, we go back to talking about the factors of production. So, production possibility curve, that thing just keeps moving outward to the right. It just keeps moving outward to the right because things are becoming so efficient. Costs are coming down. The cost of production are coming down. And so as cost of production are coming down, suppliers, quote, sellers, can generate more supply, can generate more goods and services at a cheaper price. So they just keep expanding not only production possibility curve, but that supply curve continues to go to the right. So supply continues to increase. At the same time, supplies continue to increase. What's happening to demand? I mean, if you think about just in the last 10 years, just the increase in the number of mobile devices, iPhones, iPads, computers, personal type of technological devices that everybody think they have to have. So the perception, and again, if you go back to some of the shifters on demand, perception, information, price, those shifters are shifting that demand curve outward. So over time, and it just keeps moving outward. So if you think about, go back to the little 2x2 that's sitting there, and you've got both of them are shifting to the right. Supply shifting to the right, demand shifting to the right. And we found out if you look at that little 2x2, both of them shifting to the right, you automatically get an increase in the quantity of those goods and services on the quantity or on the horizontal part of the axis. But as we've found on different markets, what's really happening to the price. And in the computer market, the price is actually coming down. As demand shifts out and supply shifts out, supply is shifting out at a faster pace than demand is shifting outward, or increases in supply are happening at a faster pace or faster rate than increases in demand. And that's actually overshadowing, and it's actually giving us an idea of what's happening to price, and that it's happening to price is actually coming down. So that is kind of I don't want to say a simplification, but it is somewhat of a simplification in the computer market. And I think they may have used that market as an example of what's happening with income and perception and information and just the social well-being in the United States, driving that demand outward to the right, and then just the efficiency and the rapid change in technology driving that supply curve downward to the right. So we get an increase in quantity and at the same time, a decrease in the price of all this technological capability, let's call it. And I think that is what they referred to in the textbook, not so much the actual price of the items themselves, even though they are coming down, but it's the computer capacity or the technology capacity. The price of that on a per unit basis is precipitously dropping. So that's a computer market. And as they talk about in the text, it's not as volatile a market as some other markets are, simply because for the most part, there isn't an issue with the gaining the factors of production that are used in the production process to generate this technology. Again, cell phones, computers, iPads, all your technological devices. I would put one caveat on that. In a normal situation, I would agree with them. But as we all saw, what happened with COVID? With COVID, there were supply chain issues almost across the board. For the most part, most goods and services coming from another country. So technology, if it was being imported, computer chips for your cell phone, those types, COVID did put a wrinkle in that supply explanation that they have in the book, where they talk about, for the most part, there isn't a supply issue with the goods and services or the capital goods that go together to produce the technology, produce the items that you use on a daily basis in the computing world. Now, let's flip from a fairly stable economy to economy that is extremely volatile. And that economy that's extremely volatile is the economy when it surrounds crude oil, price of gasoline, price of diesel, price of fuel oil. That's a very volatile market. And it's a market that has continued, especially the market for gasoline, it just keeps continuing as demand keeps going up. And it's perception, it's information, it's rise in income, especially in third world, underdeveloped countries, increase in population, more people with driver's license, more people with automobiles means more people, automobiles on the road. So the demand of gas just keeps moving outward, or the demand curve for gas keeps moving to the right. It keeps moving outward. Even with the push, especially in the United States, for EVs, it's still, the demand for gasoline in the United States still continues to increase. And what they talk about in here is, and it's mostly income, is the demand shifter that's driving that demand increase. Want to talk just a few minutes, and they spend a fair amount of time talking about OPEC, and it's a group of countries in the oil producing world, Saudi Arabia, along a lot of countries on that, Saudi Arabian Peninsula, Russia. So they form a conglomerate, a cooperative, that their main goal is to control the supply of crude oil. And in controlling the supply of crude oil, they want to keep the price of crude oil as high as possible. And it works pretty well as long as everybody plays in the sandbox together. But I think it's 2007, 2008, there was a collapse of that agreement within OPEC, and they flooded the market. And if they flood the market with crude oil and supply bumps up, shifts out to the right, demand, even though it's increasing, it's coming to the right also. So quantity is increasing, but the prices continue to go down because the supply is outpacing the demand. So what happens is you end up with these nations within OPEC trying to play in the sandbox together, all trying to agree, trying to control supply to ensure that the price goes up. But unfortunately, and it goes back to the principles of economics, more is preferred to less. you have each country wants to sell as much oil as possible and keep the price as high as possible. And to do that, they want their fellow countries within this cooperation or this consortium. They want all the other players in the consortium to limit their supply. They are self-serving, self-interested, driven by profit, and they want to be exempt from helping to control the supply. And that's exactly what happened in 2020. Saudi Arabia, Russia were butting heads against each other. They were both trying to generate as much supply as possible. And as they increased that supply just in normal, you would expect that supply to go out with demand increasing. You would expect quantity to continue to increase, but you'd expect the price to go down. Well, what threw the wrinkle in it in 2020 was the issue with COVID. And you've got supply shifting out to the right. You've got demand shifting back to the left because people were staying at home. They weren't driving, and it was a global phenomenon. So COVID really, the overlay of COVID on that crude oil market, the overlay of COVID, the increase in supply by Russia and Saudi Arabia, it actually ended up driving price down. And at the same time, it drove quantities down also. And where you can actually get an idea of what's going to happen in the crude oil, the natural gas market, if you will follow the markets, you've got the spot price for natural gas and the spot price for crude oil, and basically spot price just means it's the current price. It could be $80 a barrel, $100 a barrel. That's the trading price, the equilibrium price in that market. Today's your spot price. Your futures price is the price that is going to be the price of that particular commodity sometime in the future. And it's the demand supply shifters that people are looking at. They're looking at information, they're looking at perception, they're trying to guess at disposable income. So they're taking information that they can find within the market on all of those demand and supply shifters, putting it together, running it through their economic model, and that's where they're trying to estimate the future price for a lot of these commodities. And it doesn't matter whether it's fuel oil, whether it's natural gas, whether it's corn, soybeans, wheat, fat kettle, pork bellies. They are trying to take all of this information that we talked about when we were discussing those demand and supply shifters, running it through their economic models, and then they're trying to generate that futures price, trying to make money, trying to guess at what they need to do now. If the futures price is X, what do they need to do now, Y, with the spot market? That kind of wraps up the computer market, the crude oil gas market. Again, one fairly stable market in computers. Supply continues to go up, technology booming, price of those computer capacity or computing capacity or technology capacity, however you want to phrase it, continues to come down. And it's the efficiency in the market that's driving that. Flip side is crude oil, extremely volatile, depends on what the demand for gasoline is going to be. It also depends on, can the OPEC nations play well in the sandbox together? Can they come to an agreement on how many barrels of oil to produce at any given time? Because they're trying to control the supply of that crude oil, and in trying to control the supply of that crude oil, they're trying to keep prices higher and trying to generate revenue for each of those countries that are playing in that OPEC sandbox. That wraps it up for this second segment. We'll get back in a few minutes and we'll talk about the stock market. Talk to you soon.